That's I love that you said that. Just controlling your own destiny. That's something that even when I was smaller, like people told me I'd never even play junior. You know what I mean? And I sort of believed in myself, and I knew I had that fire, a sort of a knack for goaltending, and I believed in myself when my resume was a clean slate, and like you said, I think it's funny that you said that because before we spoke on this conversation, I wasn't really thinking of that, but it's something that for me personally, just having that self awareness and knowing where you're going, and I guess it leads a bit back into visualization. Like back in junior when I was in the BCHL. I went to the team there, the Surrey Eagles, in October, and we were like 1-9 when I got there. And then I think it was like a few games in when I was there, and I said in an interview, I said, "Yeah, like we're gonna try and string some wins together, and then we're gonna, hopefully win a championship, and then go to an RBC Cup." Next thing you know, we're first place in the league by the end of the year. Stir up a whole ton of parity, win the league and go to an RBC, right? And that sort of was like one of the biggest highlights of my entire career, right? And sort of that self-fulfilling prophecy of like believing in yourself, you know what I mean? And sort of doing what it takes and kind of having that vision for it. But what would you say to goalies who are, sort of like depending on everybody else, making excuses, pointing the finger at other guys, right? To kind of get them out of that, get them more into a can do solution based mindset rather than, like making excuses and blaming other guys.
Sure, making excuses and pointing fingers really won't get you anywhere. I think, like you said, kind of just being self-aware and just being the best teammate you can be. But more importantly, if you go in with a positive mindset and you stop making excuses for yourself, you hope that that type of character and that type of aura you're giving off carries off the players. Um, Ultimately, it's going to be up to them. You know, they need to, if they're making problems on their end, they need to fix those problems. Like I said, if you can't control it, to a certain extent, you can control how your team plays. You can be obviously, a guiding voice as the goalie. You do have a really good view of the ice, but you need to find a constructive way to approach it. If you just go out there and you kind of say like, you guys are leaving me out to dry and things like that at the end of the game, it creates animosity. So how do you approach the way you're talking to your teammates? How do you approach how you're talking to your coach? That's a big piece to it.
Mhm. And so maybe dive in a little deeper, you say you got to be careful about what you say because you create animosity, and you're right. I 100% agree with you. So maybe what are some ways that guys can approach their teammates or their coaches in a much more friendly way, sort of communicating without stirring up the pot, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, so I think whenever you want to talk to your coach, you definitely want to do it on a more private end. You don't want to ever, bring up something like that in front of everyone in the team. It just doesn't look good on all ends. I think if you're noticing something that the coach isn't, I think offer your perspective. Hey, coach, I know you can't maybe see it from my side of the view, but I have a full ice view of the I have a full view of the rink, and I can notice that our D aren't pinching quick enough. The gap's too large. Like that's something we need to address. And then maybe having it come from the coach instead of you,
Hmm.
that might have a whole different effect. Because a lot of times that they feel that maybe they don't want to hear something coming from the goalie. They kind of a lot of times I've heard back and when I was playing, if I said something to my defense, they would say, "Oh, why don't you stop the puck?" And I didn't want to obviously get into the argument like I didn't stop the puck because you had no gap control, and before you knew it, it was 2-on-0 with 3 rebounds.
Hmm.
So that gets you nowhere, and that goes back to getting animosity and just pointing fingers, and it just creates bad vibes, if you will, in the locker room.
Hmm.
There's a time and a place to go over everything. And I think sometimes in a game is not necessarily the best way to address it. I think in between periods is much better than, on the bench yelling at a teammate or whatnot. Um, so look at when and where you're talking to teammates, how you're talking to teammates. Are you completely being aggressive and trying to feel like you're dominating them and giving them an order, or are you trying to offer them something that's going to help both you and them?
Hmm.
The big thing is a lot of times when you're talking to people, you want to say, how does this benefit you? Okay. If you gap up a little bit more, I have a little bit more time to set my feet. When I have time to set my feet, I can put pucks into the corner as opposed to leaving them right in the slot, which makes your life a living hell. How are you approaching your conversations is a big piece to it.
Hmm. So during last year's playoffs, going all the way to the finals when you got there, like what was the biggest difference between your goalies and theirs to sort of lead you guys to victory and get the job done, right? Like what did you see or feel even that led to the other goalie's downfall and what led to your guys' success?
Yeah, and I don't really think it was necessarily a downfall. I mean, everyone that we went against played, great. Goaltending in the playoffs was awesome from every team that we played for the most part. Again, I think that goes back to the mindset. I think that we believed if we played our game and forced our game on them, that nobody was going to beat us. And again, doesn't matter who, doesn't matter where we played. I mean, we played games in our practice rink. So again, location doesn't matter for us. It's just our team. We knew we had a goal and we stuck to our game plan that we've been working on for 56 games prior to that. And um, I think a lot of it also has to do with that leadership in the locker room that, hey, we've been here before. We've had these obstacles. How do we overcome them? And I think we fell back on that mentality and that experience. And I think that was huge. Going into the goaltending aspect, I think that Max being um, so unorthodox makes it extremely hard for someone to predict how he's going to play if
Mhm.
you don't really watch him. And I mean, if you really want to learn the way that Max plays, you need to watch 20, 30 games. And that's just not feasible in 1 week in the SPHL. And I don't think a lot of coaches really look into that too much. I really don't even know if I don't think there is even another goalie coach in the SPHL. So I don't think that there's any team that is, devoting the time to look at other teams' goalies like I am. And I think that's a benefit to the team, just having an extra set of eyes looking just at the goalie from the goalie perspective and thinking, like, okay, we're playing this team two, maybe three times. Where are his weaknesses lying? And ultimately, I don't really think, in all honesty, I'm making or breaking a game with a scouting report. But once in a while, if something that I said in a scouting report can generate a scoring opportunity or a goal here or there, that could be the difference in a game. Um,
Mhm.
so we just really try and prepare and execute our game plan, and that goes back to the variables of things we can control. We don't know where we're playing, we don't know who we're playing that first round, but what we can control is our work ethic, how we're preparing, and the way our game is played, and how we're gonna enforce our will on them.
So maybe talk a little bit more about, right? Like you said, the goaltending in playoffs was good across the board. Like what is that? What does that feel like? What does that look like? What does playoffs require from a goalie really to be a champion though, right? Like everybody's good, but maybe dive into a little bit what pro playoffs are like, what goalies can expect, and what is required of them with their big saves. I don't know, communication, grit, whatever it is that you think.
Yeah, I think grit comes down to it. I think communication, all those things, but I think it really comes down to is when the moment is at its most important, do you rise to the occasion or not? I mean, at the end of the day, they say, what is it? Cream rises to the top.
Hmm.
So I think that, if you really are a champion, that you'll rise to the occasion in those biggest moments. And some goalies do, some goalies don't. I mean, like Binnington last year in the playoffs, he was unstoppable. But
Hmm.
um, I mean, like you look at Max, I think that he had a really good year all the way going into playoffs. He had won a championship in college before, so he knows what it takes to be a champion, and he knew
Hmm.
that he needed to get that next level. And I mean, he absolutely did. He was regular season. He was a 2.29 goals against average with a 922 save percentage, and then that's really good numbers as far as first year rookies. Um, and he took it to the next level. Playoffs, he had a 2.14 goals against average and a 943 save percentage. So he improved from his regular season and he rose to the occasion. I think that's a big piece to it. And yeah, I mean that comes down to work ethic and experience and confidence. He knew that everything he did that year was building up to that moment. He knew that he was prepared. He had that visualization and self belief that I'm going to get this championship.
Obviously, we talk a bit about like I like everything we sort of led up to right there, just because you talk about rising to the occasion and preparing all year for these things, right? And some guys sort of rise to the occasion and some guys don't. But, obviously going to the finals is huge and those games are big for anyone. But we all have big games in our careers and they're not just championship games, right? I just want to talk a bit about how champions sort of handle stress and manage it accordingly because I've gotten like so many questions on that. and maybe give my audience some advice as to how they can overcome anxiety in big games and how to manage their emotions when there's a lot on the line, so that way they can rise to the occasion.